And we are live. Let me check the volume. I think this time around we launched it well. And also Instagram. Let me see. Hopefully all is gonna go well tonight. Yes. All right. Welcome, people from the internet, to this live session. A-létheia here on the Speak Up Club. Tonight, we are going to be commenting on that topic as you could see on the title, um, fear of death or fear of dying, which is you know, is a common issue for everybody. Different ages for humanity will have like a different perception of the same issue, but it's an issue nonetheless for everybody. Um, you begin to sort of become aware of your own self at the same time that you start feeling death as a child. The first instances that you realize that there is that situation in which your life might be in danger actually makes you understand that you have such a thing alive. Of course, different generations, we always say that depending on your generation, your perception of things is different, of course. My generation was totally different than the generation of most of the people that I tend to share a lot with as I teach in a school. And of course, I tend to speak with a lot of teens. And teens today, I'm speaking about people that were born in the 2000s and up, all of them. Uh, you have been exposed exponentially exposed to things that were not popular when I was a kid. Even though as a kid there was a lot of different things regarding technology of entertainment, the way certain things worked were not exactly the same. I'm speaking about specifically video games. Video games have this situation. I mean, that is really common that a character, whomever is playing a video game, has the capacity of having more than one chance or a chance to get a mission done. You begin your mission, you begin with different quantity of lives, a nice number of lives. Normally, as a beginner, you will begin with three, two, or you get lives along the way, chances for you to repeat. Sometimes in the middle of a mission, if things are not going your way, you simply just kill yourself and repeat. I know the concept because I played a lots of video games when I was a teen. But again, that was way after I had lots of different hours of my life spending in the real world, in which I understood a lot of different things regarding this same thing that we're speaking about, the fear of dying, fear of death. But kids today, they don't have that chance. The chance of facing reality for kids today is really not so often that you actually get to see it. You spend most of your time in closed environments. In these closed environments, obviously, you have the situation that everything is controlled. Your parents are the ones that are capable of giving you such conditions for your life that you got basically your world all figured out. You go from school to your house, from your house to maybe some of your friends' house, and sometimes you visit your father's or mother's job for some reason. Sometimes you go to see the doctor, and you visit your grandparents, and that's it. That's about it. When you begin to go out again, still is control. It's obviously among the you visit friends that are known by your parents, people that they feel that you're comfortable with. Hello, Mr. Andres. How are you? I hope you enjoyed the show tonight. Anyway, when we are speaking about these controlled environments, how or when do you ever have a chance to actually perceive, you know, your life in possible danger? Well, obviously, you have those encounters that everybody normally gets exposed to, as, for example, one of your relatives or known people, people you're acquainted to, suffer or went through life or death experience near an accident, for example, that will nearly put them to a serious situation, or survived different diseases, different situations, and of course, if we are speaking about today, we just came out of COVID. All of us had that particular situation to deal with when it came to, dying. But then again, this is a situation that is still under certain level of control. COVID not so much, but everything else, certain level of control. The level of fragility of life is not that much if everything is so steady, and obviously you don't have to face so much danger in your real life in your day to day. But what about, kids that they do not enjoy those conditions, those great conditions, those comfortable situations of, being out there, traveling to your school with your private transportation, or going to a private clinic to, have a regular checkups, medical checkups, stuff like that. There are people, and which is the majority of kids in the world, that don't have that don't have that experience, and still they get to be exposed to video games at the same time in the same level. So video games is a reality that goes for all different types of realities. So it's a reality, no, it's an attribute of the reality of all different things today, no matter what situation you're living. But in most cases, in the majority of the cases, bigger cities, you see that those kids that are exposed to, you know potential danger situations are the ones that live in the most fringe areas of society. They also get exposed to the same video games, maybe even more, especially the violent type of video games, than the kids that live, regular student lifestyles. And regular students' lifestyles, we all know, have a quite easy going type of lifestyles. They only live their lives to study. The parents are the ones to have all the burden of reality. And of course, they given a really pretty controlled environment. They don't even know what that means. So that's more or less the reality that they live. Back in my days, you were constantly exposed to things that could make you possibly, could possibly kill you for many different reasons. I mean, just in our hobbies, it was so common that, at least for example, in the city where I lived, that you heard of kids that had accidents that changed their lives because they were swimming in a local river. They jumped on the wrong side of a river and they hit a rock, and that was it. Paraplegic, or simply just lost a limb, lost an eye, etc., etc. I remember in my city we used the subway. It's a major city, so of course the quantity of people that travel throughout the city, or from one side to the other side of the city, go obviously using the subway, and you get to see lots of different people. There was a time that I became really aware of the quantity of people that traveled on subway that are amputees of some kind. I didn't really know until I paid attention. Once I paid attention, it was incredibly surprising that just in one moment you could see so many different type of people walking in front of you that were any type of amputees. Some of them were amputees because they survived being run over by the train at actually using the same trains that we were traveling with. Because in that city, that type of accident sometimes happens, purposely or not. Those were different examples of how you were close to death for some reason. Because obviously, anyone in that city could easily fall on the rails and just die. So that was a way for you to perceive how a person could easily die. There's so many different other cases of people that died because partying. Yeah, I mean, from drinking to car crashes to house to fires in a house to simply just jumping out of a window, etc., etc., etc. In my lifetime, I knew of so many people that died partying that, to be honest, it was crazy. It was just simply crazy. How come people died because they are partying? I mean, how come you get or reach the end of your days exactly in the moment that you are dedicated to enjoy, to have good time? Yeah, that happens. And if that happens, as many other different type of deaths are obviously possible. And I was witness in my life of many of these type of deaths on people that I knew of. So of course, I know that my life has not been that difficult, that complicated. I have not lived under for example, war zones or etc. Only in the cities that I've lived, I believe that I share the same experiences that most people in Latin America share. I'm speaking about the major countries from Argentina to all the way to Mexico. Okay, so speaking about all these people, I guess that I will be an average of most experiences people my age will have. All of us somehow were exposed to death, a lot of it. Our generation in our 40s. So, what about the generation of our parents? Well, they had it even worse because back then there were many different things that were not even reported. Like crazy situations of secret ma- massacres as it happened. For example, I remember that people like Garcia Marquez, famous writer from Colombia, wrote in many of his books references regarding to these type of situations, as this was a common thing that in Colombia, um, guerrilla wars had the issue of having the collateral situation of certain towns in the countryside that suffer massacres. And this is a situation that went on for all the years that the wars, the guerrilla wars, lasted. And we're speaking about over 60 years, if I'm not mistaken. How many people probably died because of this? There are a lot of different information online if you want to just Google it. I mean, the victims of the guerrilla wars in Colombia. And it's true. And that's, again, among the major countries of the region. You check on the history of Salvador, you check on the history of Mexico, you check on the history of Venezuela, you check on the history of Brazil. So many different people that have been exposed to situations that were based on, the conflict that Mr. Jordan, welcome. Exposed to situations like wars, like famines, like natural disasters, lots of them, and that possibly were not really reported in the age of my grandparents. That's true. That happened. And so on if I keep on going back. So, all this just to say the same thing. This generation is a generation that have not been really exposed to death as previous generations were, right? You have had it easy. Most of the exposition that you have been through screens for some reason. News, movies, video games. And the thing about the video games is that, with all the whole thing about you being capable of participating in the action, that you are the player, and you having the capacity of dying and come back and dying and come back, I guess, yes, let's say put that situation about dying from a very unrealistic perspective. And you can see now that some people commit silly actions that make them lose their lives because of the same attitude. That dying has become banal somehow, but we still have fear of death. We still have fear of dying, and that still produces anxiety in us. And it's weird that this anxiety that we have because of the fear of death also make us sometimes take decisions that made us lose our lives, meaning make us die. Examples. What I explained before about my generation. I remember that in my time, it was common that people would fear being killed because of the common crime, city crime. This is a situation that's not changed, but the tendencies have in somehow. My time, you could be mugged, and specifically some things that could have you killed were things like, for example, your shoes. Yeah, weird, but yeah, people could kill you for shoes. Another thing that you could be killed for, a watch, and of course something better like a car, motorcycle. You know, but those things could definitely have you killed, and that was because there was that tendency in those countries, Venezuela, Colombia, Brazil, in which crime was so gruesome that criminals actually went all the way to that part. Like, I mean, they just didn't not simply just mug you or beat you. No, they killed people for stupid stuff. Anyways, you got that generation suffering from these things, right? This generation, you can see that murders over there are related, for example, at least in the city where I live, in Guayaquil. And possibly the same thing happens in Colombia, possibly the same things happens in Mexico. People, you hear that some people get killed and they actually have gruesome deaths. People hanged and are being found in the city. Some of them have been murdered with knives, and so they have been murdered with different ways that just simply are dreadful to speak about. And the whole situation is that all these people that we know that we read about lately that have been found in public places in such uh, ways are related to the business of drugs. And we all know that the business of drugs is a really awful situation that has haunted Latin America in the last year. So reality is not new. However, the fact that it is out there, it makes the new imagery of death coming to be part of your day to day, your life. So of course you fear that maybe if you go out there, you will be involved in a showdown or a bullet confrontation between mobsters, drug dealers versus police, or dealers versus other drug dealers, or simply sicarios, etc., etc. That's a fear that is a current one, that is out there. In the past, those fears that people had because of tendencies of their time, became obviously the legends that we all know of, and the history of every culture that we know that have this particular type of telltale history. I'm speaking about cultures that are old, that have stories of their ancestors and legends and um, moral tales, etc., etc. Some of them are based on, let's say, all monsters of their own culture. For the Japanese, you have the yokai. For the uh, indigenous people, you have all the different cosmology of the gods and demons, and that we all have around this area because of our indigenous ancestors. Stories, like for example, you got the jaguar people, you got the monkey people, you got the lizard people, and so many other different stories, etc., etc. The Vikings in some areas of Europe, the north of Europe, have left some of their own stories. You get to hear that some of them have been adapted to modern lore in science fiction or fantasy, as for example, what you know of today of vampires, zombies, etc., etc. They all come from originally from these legends, right? These legends that have been nurtured throughout the history of the world, and all of them have been based on the same principle: fear of death. We fear dying for some reason or another, and the ways in which that thing happens produces a little bit of a trauma, a little bit of PTSD of sorts, to the concept of it. Today, all the approach we have to that, to dying in itself, to the possibility of ceasing to exist, comes again because of a camera, because of a screen. Not the camera, sorry, but because of a screen. We see it in screens, we see it in our fantasy so much, but we also see it in our reality too, because snuff is now public. I mean, there's so many videos out there in which people die, and they are seen by everyone like it's just simply another video. People have become desensitized somehow to these images. And me, on my time, I remember that, yeah, I was curious sometimes of checking some images that were awful, but for some seconds of my life, it was not really something that I could indulge myself with, because, I mean, why? Why would I? Today, we are overwhelmed with the quantity of images that have this. And as we have that exposure constantly there. When we sleep and we have dreams, obviously our dreams feed from this imaginary we are giving to it, because that's what our subconscious do. So how come not feeling anxiety of some way of dying when somehow you are feeding your subconscious with images in which people die constantly? And that's just simply speaking about violent dying. What about regular dying? Regular dying is another one that we don't see as a natural thing so much, because we are too young, apparently, to really understand this. At my age, we begin to see it from a different perspective, because we start seeing how our bodies are giving signs to ceasing being the way we were. For example, when our eyesight begins to fail, when our movement capacity seems to stall a bit, when our energies in general, the recovery processes we have are lower than before. we all understand that things are not going better with time. They're definitely going to get worse. And that's definitely a sign of our demands, of our short demands. We are going to die. For some people, this produces so much, of a conflict. Because again, the context that you have towards that is totally different than what is the context that our ancestors had. And even our ancestors dealt with that with different things that basically don't really matter today. And as they don't, newer generations are basically, uh, let's say, they're hopeless in a way to deal with the content that is necessary for us to really understand what means dying, because it's not that you have witnesses, survivals of death that can tell you, okay, dying is like this, but it's not so bad. No, we don't have that. We only have fantasy to feed by the idea of what means dying. And that fantasy is worse when it comes to video games that allows you to revive constantly. Even fantasy is being affected so much right now, like so many different titles that you get to see in comics, for instance, that are related to coming back to life, resuscitating, reviving, reincarnating, etc. It's all about not really giving the importance of death the way death is supposed to be. It's all about banalizing somehow dying, and that's not good. That's just not what our ancestors did. And I'm not really defending our ancestry for some reason. I'm just saying that they were more capable of dealing with this thing better than we are. We don't have the means to really conceive the whole process of dying from a perspective that will help us, especially because we are incapable of really believing in any religion today. Religions are there basically to just simply brainwash us for a little, just brainwash us enough to make us feel a little bit comfortable. But when the brainwashing doesn't really get anywhere, because that's what religions do, when the brainwashing doesn't allow us to just simply think that God will take care of everything and we don't have to worry. When that happens, when the dose of spirituality that is out there in the lore of any typical religion that you get to see does not really help, is when anxiety that is produced by fear of dying becomes unbearable. So what is good? What can you do to avoid this particular type of anxiety? Well, of course, you need to stop thinking about dying for sure, definitely, because let's say that if you had the capacity to really go on a spiritual venture that would allow you to perceive, for example, the limitations of the transcendence of your spirit. Seems I'm speaking about mumble jumble now, but if you gave yourself that chance, you will possibly begin to consider life from a perspective that will seem to consider the same principles that ancestors did. And I'm speaking about more than three generations back. With the last generations, as it was described before, that connection is not there 100%. It's too abrupt. The type of death that we're used to is just the images type of death, and or the fantasy type of death. And the fantasy type of death, the fantasy that is both in entertainment or in beliefs, because you had that fantasy too. In both fantasies, uh, we we don't have the tools here in our imagination to really conceive what it means for our lives to cease to be. What we have is, then again, uh, bleak science, um, immense in fantasy, and we also have, of course, the denial, the denial perspective. You know, the ones that trying to hide things or to avoid things that are obviously there to make things not be the way they are because of purposes. You know, all the way from politics, religion, or simply just mind comfort, because that's also true. In all of those reasons, just simply feed on the same process of anxiety, the anxiety that is produced by the same fear. What can we do? In reality, what can we do? Stop. We need to stop. We need to stop considering death as the deterrent or determinant point for any sort of situation we have to deal with in reality. We can't really put death as part of our plan since we don't know what to do with it. What we can do instead is project for our life course, you know, the different things that we have to go through in life. Because, I mean, if we're living in this world, we need to have a plan to enjoy or simply just to do what is it that we want to do. So if you're living, make it worth for some way or some or another. I mean, try to get something out of life. Try to invest your time in doing those things that you think your life it deserves to do. And what I mean by this is, I'm not speaking about indulging in things that you know are not really worthy of life. And what I mean by this is when whatever is it that you do begins to deteriorate the capacity of enjoyment of life of others. So that's a principle that needs to be considered by every person, no matter what your beliefs are. Your happiness cannot really destroy other people's happiness. So if your happiness is based on other people's unhappiness, your happiness is wrong. The rest of life should actually be based on the capacity of pursuing those things that you think will make you, the person that you are, enjoy the whole process of living such a life. Video games will confuse you. Fantasy will confuse you. Religion will confuse you. Science will disappoint you. And in all the other different things that you do, I mean, trying to figure out what that means, you will not really get any type of satisfaction because, again, you don't have witnesses that have survived death. Those that were dying, that they died. Those that died, they are no more. And that is basically the the simplicity of death. The fact that these people are no more. What we have from them are their memories, are their deeds, and those incredible actions that we remember them for. Simply that. So people, don't focus on that. Don't focus on what will happen if you die. Now, for the rest of the year, well, we have the announcements that are based on what we in A-létheia are planning for this year. One of them is that the Speak Up Club is opening new schedules right now. We used to have only the fixed ones that were based on the two schedules that we had Wednesdays and Saturdays. Wednesdays, 18 hours New York, 17 hours Guayaquil, and Saturdays, 15 hours, yeah, 15 hours New York, 14 hours Guayaquil. But apart from those, we are now opening quorum for new schedules, of course, depending on the quantity of people that register, as we are having in this case the sessions um, with multiple interactions as opposed to what we used to have that we only had a topic per week. Right now, the Speak Up Club is way more dynamic than what it used to be, and with these multiple interactions, we can have more than the three sessions that I was mentioning that we had in the past. So we are inviting everyone that is listening to this particular streaming session, commenting on the idea of death, of dying, of fearing the fear of dying, to participate in the Speak Up Club. It's an area that is designed for people that have a little bit of a lot of the capacity of speaking the language that we're working with. It's English, but do not have a place where to practice. And of course, begins to rust away enough that it endangers the capacity that the person had in the past of being a fluid speaker. So, again, let's put it like this: you want to practice your English, this is your spot. Okay. So, for the Speak Up Club, we got for now those 2 hours that we mentioned, and we got the new schedules. We also want you guys to contact us to see in what schedule you would love to participate. So we're waiting for this new people starting up 2023 with a banger. Apart from that, we are offering, of course, the other different um, services that we are constantly updating for from A-létheia. This one that is the Speak Up Club for everybody, the Q&A every fortnight, and of course, our presence online in the areas in which we are here in YouTube and in Instagram, and of course in Facebook too. So, people, thank you for attending tonight, Mr. Andres, Mr. Jordan. Awesome. And be seeing you next week. Good luck. All right, here one. We finish here. Yes.